All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the fourth quarter pod. We were meant to start a little earlier, but after some technical difficulties, we're finally up and running. You might see some video technical difficulty from Jake throughout this one, but I implore you to please ignore it and just listen to our smooth voices, especially Jake's, who's just gotten himself a cheeky little blue Yeti mic. You see it there in the bottom.
How you going, everybody? I do apologize. The voice should sound smooth and silky today, and I'll try not to move around as much, but just don't look at my screen because for whatever reason, it's just not coming through at the live speed that we want, that 1080p. But just close your eyes, listen to my voice, pretend you're on radio, and we'll deliver the best takes and information we can as always. So thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, easy. I think we'll be everybody will be keen to see those like freeze frame faces of yours. We'll see how many different faces we can pull out and screenshot and maybe create a little collage or something.
Yeah, just make a joke out of it. That's probably the best way to go about it, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly. We'll definitely be back up and running at full speed next one, hopefully, if everything gets sorted out technically, but we'll endeavor to make sure that happens. But moving on to the pod content, and it's a shame that we're kind of running 30 minutes behind because we have got a lot of content that we really wanted to kind of smash through. So we're going to do our best to get through everything without obviously keeping everybody here way longer than you bargained for. So there's a few things that we want to talk about. Firstly, there's Sports Illustrated did their top 100 list, and there's some kind of key call outs that we wanted to discuss. We've both done our own kind of analyses on that list, and we want to kind of just maybe crack what Sports Illustrated have done there. But before we get to that, we want to do a little segment on some big swing players in the league. So what we mean by that is we've hand selected a few players from teams where we believe that they have the most influence on whether or not that team is successful. And it may or may not be the superstars on the team, but it may also be other people in the team that you might not expect. So I want to really kick into that. And so what I want to do is pass it over to you, Jake, to give me your first biggest swing player. Who is it and what team are they from?
Yeah, absolutely, Luca. It's a very interesting segment because I think when you talk about swing players, you have to remove superstars because it's pretty obvious to say a superstar is going to lead to team success, a guy like a LeBron, Kevin Durant, so on and so forth. So I really try and look at guys who people don't generally think about first up, but when you spend some time thinking about it, realize without this player or depending on how this player performs, could really change the outcome of a franchise. So the first one that I thought about, and especially considering Ben Simmons is probably gone in the next few days, was Tobias Harris. Now, in one way, you could say, well, we know what Tobias Harris is. He's a sub 20 point scorer, a fringe all-star, a tall dude who sort of fits that roster. But I think Tobias is going to have to really take another big step up this year to keep Philly relevant. Joel Embiid can't do it all himself, and while Philly do have a lot of good supplementary players, I think Tobias Harris is the key cog, along with a Tyrese Maxey, to get Philly in that upper echelon again. Teams like Miami Heat, Milwaukee Bucks, Brooklyn Nets, they're all a few steps ahead of them, in my opinion. So if Tobias Harris can elevate his game in some way, I'm not sure exactly how. I think he's the linchpin between whether Philly can run it deep in the playoffs or come up short, as I'm predicting, in that sort of 6 to 8 seed. So do you have any takes on Tobias?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. I actually did have Philly in here as one of the teams that I wanted to talk about it, but I went at it from a different angle. I actually think that Joel Embiid is, and I know we spoke about superstars not being obviously the kind of key person that we want to discuss as swing players, but the reason why I bring up Embiid, and I'll kind of get onto Tobias, is because I think we know what Tobias is and what he can do. We know he's not worth the contract that he's on, but his output is respectable. And I actually think that the burden of responsibility in this situation, at least for like what Philly have put themselves in, kind of sits with Embiid, in the sense that obviously, I don't know if he can do much more than what he did last year, but I just can't help but think about it from this perspective of the only person left on that team that can kind of will them to a deep playoffs run with kind of just decent support from the rest of the team is Embiid. And if Embiid sits out most of the season for whatever reason, gets injured, anything happens to Embiid, I think the team as a whole crumbles. Even if you have Tobias kind of elevate his game, if that makes sense. So, I mean, that kind of is self-explanatory and perhaps a little redundant, but I think it's a really important call out for a team that's in turmoil. You kind of need your superstar to be now more available and actually really kind of, it sounds crazy, but do more than what he did. But I completely agree with you as well. If Tobias can step it up a notch, I think he's going to make a very positive impact to, changing Philly from just a playoff contender to a deep playoff contender. But at the end of the day, I think if Embiid just isn't available, isn't what he was even last season, then they're going to be in big trouble.
I don't disagree with that. I guess we're just coming at this a little bit different. The definition of swing to me was someone who may or may not be there, but if they are, great, you could go really far, or if they aren't, that's when the rubber hits the road. But I do agree, Embiid without potentially Simmons and hopefully having a healthy body is going to be the deciding factor on Philadelphia's season. So yeah, I agree with that.
Awesome.
What do you got next? Who's your next player?
My next player is actually, it is a superstar, but I think there's a really good reason why I want to talk about this player, and it is the LA Lakers, and it's Anthony Davis.
Interesting.
So the reason why I want to talk about Anthony Davis and the Lakers, while they've completely overhauled their roster, we still saw what happened in the first round of the playoffs last year. Without AD, and granted, LeBron wasn't his full self. We know he's injured, and obviously he didn't bring his complete to the table. But without Davis, the Lakers are incomplete, in my opinion. He currently provides the only true interior scoring presence, with his ability to stretch the floor as well. And he's obviously an elite defensive player who locks down the paint. And with the departure of Gasol, that front court defensive burden falls with him even further. You do have players like Dwight Howard who've come back, but Dwight Howard, for most of the game, isn't going to play alongside Anthony Davis. And we'll likely see smaller ball lineups where they have Melo in there along with LeBron and Davis playing the five. And so while LeBron is the core of this team, he's the foundational kind of element to the squad and its success. And we know Westbrook's going to be 100 miles per hour night in, night out. But I don't think this team has a real shot at the chip without Davis healthy and contributing.
It's interesting because, again, it just comes back down to, like, I have an expectation that Davis will be Davis. So in terms of swing, it's like, I didn't even think of him. But because of the injuries last year, because of the inconsistency with his body, it's true what you say. If he can't lace them up for 60 to 70 games in the regular season and get through a 7 or 8 week period in the playoffs where he's Anthony Davis, the team does become quite old and quite dysfunctional very fast. You've mentioned Westbrook, who in a certain situation could be a really valuable playoff piece, but in many situations could be a negative aspect to the Lakers, where we're placing a lot of priority on a 38-year-old LeBron James, who all indications show that he's probably riding off into the sunset sooner rather than later. So, yeah, mentioning that is a good shout. I'd like to see Anthony Davis at an MVP level next season, and if he can do that, it puts Lakers in a really good stead.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And again, like, kind of, as you say, like, you expect Anthony Davis to be Anthony Davis, but we have seen that his body is kind of made of glass a little bit. And so I just thought it was probably poignant to call out the Lakers situation because, yeah, like, if even, let's say Davis is healthy for the playoffs And I think they could be obviously a very scary playoff team if he's completely healthy. But then I've got a concern as well that if he doesn't play a good portion of the regular season, what does the Lakers standing look like, and what's their playoff schedule? If they have to face a top 1-2 team early because they slip, that could be really hard for them. So there's just, Davis is so important. I think that he really is, encapsulates a swing player to me, even though we kind of know what to expect from Davis, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. My third guy, Luka, again, I've sort of gone for some middle pack kind of players in the NBA, but a guy that I found very interesting in the offseason because of what he earned is Lonzo Ball.
Yeah.
I feel like Lonzo Ball at 82 million becomes a serious piece for the Chicago Bulls. He's one of the main players, along with Vooch, who's going to try and convince Zach LaVine to stay, and will be one of the people expected to provide success to the Chicago Bulls franchise. So Lonzo Ball, I was always dumbfounded why New Orleans didn't want to keep him and was so eager to trade him. And I know Zion was as well. I really like what Lonzo brings as a defensive point guard, an instinctive playmaker. And yeah, $82 million, so sub 20 a year. It's time to put up or shut up with Lonzo, and I'm really interested to see how he performs on that pay packet.
That's such a good point around that pay packet, because I completely agree. Like, it's the first time in his career now where he's, finally getting paid. And we know what he's become. And I love that aspect to his game where he's continually developed, gotten better and better. He didn't live up to his kind of expectations as the number 2 pick, but slowly but surely he's continued to improve on his game. And I think now that kind of work has legitimized as part of this contract. And so, he's always been kind of, over the last few years, punching above his weight. Now it's time for him to really show what he's worth. And so I completely agree. And I do think that if Lonzo doesn't turn out the season that they're expecting, especially on that pay packet, one, it could spell disaster for the Bulls because they've got a very interesting team composition. And then 2, what does that mean for LaVine, as you say? So absolutely, I think Lonzo really is at the kind of center of all of that.
Yeah. Who's your final pick for this segment?
Look, this is an interesting one, but I want to go to the Warriors, and I want to talk about Draymond Green.
Interesting.
So,
I had someone else from the Warriors, but please continue.
Oh, all right. Well, then I think we might need to do a couple of players on the Warriors then. So let's talk.
Yeah. Go.
So why aren't we talking about Steph Curry here? Well, we've kind of touched on that a little bit, but I want to kind of talk about what Draymond brings to the table for this team and what that's going to mean for the Warriors moving forward. So I had Curry in my fantasy team last year, and I just want to point out that he had an incredible season. Like, he was the scoring champ, he was incredibly efficient, but I also saw the low of the lows. Like, he went 0 from 11 or 12 one game. I think that was his worst ever in his career. And I saw, because I was enjoying watching Warriors games to keep tabs on Curry, how defenses were on Curry, especially the nights where Draymond wasn't in the lineup. Draymond, when he's there, controls and facilitates the offense, allowing Curry to be on the ball less, and to kind of really be effective in that off-ball movement, where he can get to his spots and create. And I think that was a big part of kind of the system that they built, especially when Durant was there. Curry was able to just spend so much time off the ball, and he could get to his spots. They could run plays for him where he didn't need to control the offense. So without Draymond, the Warriors' offense becomes a lot more predictable, and Curry has to work for each bucket like that little bit harder. And that's not to say he's not going to get his way. He's obviously going to get his points. But at the end of the day, it's ultimately going to lead to, I think, more losses that would instead be dubs if Draymond was in the lineup. when he's shouldering some of that load defensively. Oh, what's going on out there, mate? Someone's in need of.
I was just about to say apologies. The highway patroller going 100 kilometers past my unit. So, but yes, go on.
But yeah, and then just as a side note, he's also a foundational piece to that defense. So just a little side.
You convinced me because again we go back to our definition of swing. I just assumed Draymond will be at his best, Joel Embiid will be at his best, Steph Curry will be at his best. So when I determine the swing factor of a franchise, because I'm assuming those guys are going to be at their best, I don't determine them swing players. But your comment around how Draymond allows Curry to free up more as an offensive player is so true. And conversely, how much less impactful Curry was when Draymond wasn't on the floor, especially when you had a guy like a James Wiseman who just doesn't fit the style of big and screen setter that Curry needs. But the person that I've chosen, and I thought it was quite obvious, and I'm sure you're going to agree, is Klay Thompson.
Yeah.
I feel like the Golden State Warriors without Klay could go in the 7 to 10 range in the West, maybe a little bit better, but they're probably the biggest swing team of the entire league, not to mention just players. So if Klay Thompson can come back around Christmas time, be the old version of Klay, maybe not 100%, but still be able to shoot the piss out of the ball, play elite defense, and ease up Curry's role and work symbiotically with Draymond, like that big three that they have. I feel like Klay Thompson is the ultimate linchpin for the Golden State Warriors, and he will probably be the determining factor on whether they're a first round exit or a championship contender.
Oh, I completely agree. I kind of didn't want to touch on Klay for that exact reason, for fear of maybe you having it on your radar, but also because we kind of know the impact that Klay will have on that team in like, as you say, turning them from a 7 to 10 to a championship contender. If he comes back to definitely 75% of what he was, like, I am actually like very scared of what the Warriors might be able to achieve. And if he is back around Christmas time at 75 to 100% of what he was, I maybe cheeky little bet there to see if they can get to the finals. But anyway, I digress.
I'd love to see a healthy Golden State go up against this veteran Lakers outfit. I think that would be really interesting. And one final name I want to throw at you for this segment, and it goes against my definition of swing player for this entire segment so far, but I'm going to mention Donovan Mitchell.
Yep.
And for this reason only. The guy, I believe, is actually really underrated. As an offensive player, he's probably top 10, maybe pushing top 7 in the league. Mm-hmm. He averaged 35 in that Clippers series last year on one leg, which is absolutely bananas. He's the kind of person that doesn't get spoken about, but as an offensive shooting guard, he puts up 40s like it's no one's business. And the reason I mentioned Donovan is because we know Rudy Gobert's play style as an elite rim protecting big's not going to get you to a finals.
Yeah.
It's a very good second or third guy on a championship team, but I need Donovan to show me something defensively, and he's got the ultimate mentor now in Dwayne Wade, who's obviously just bought the Utah Jazz, and I feel like if Donovan can channel a bit of the old prime D Wade, who's probably a top 3 two-way guard of all time, you know, you got guys like MJ and Kobe up there playing defense and scoring the ball. He could take Utah to that next level on his own. You know, they've got guys like Bogdanovich, Joe Ingles, Jordan Clarkson, Mike Conley, and Rudy Gobert. But Donovan needs to stay healthy and become an elite defender for them to be easily a championship contender, in my opinion. So for that reason, he's a big swing player as well.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you said. And you know what? I'm going to jump in with my honorable mention here because you got one. And similar kind of type of player, and that's Jamal Murray with the Nuggets.
Interesting. Yeah.
And the reason why I want to kind of bring up Jamal Murray is he's not the MVP candidate on this team. Jokic is going to be Jokic. But I'm confident in saying that the Nuggets could have perhaps gone past the Suns last year if Murray was healthy and playing last year. So we saw the impact of not having Murray in the lineup had on the Nuggets. So if he comes back to even close to his former self after the ACL and surgery, I think he's going to be a difference maker for the Nuggets. Just because the fact that he provides sharp shooting from the perimeter, albeit sometimes streaky, but what I want to kind of really say here is that those streaks are more like rampages. When you look at Jamal Murray, at some points, especially during that bubble, for a week or 2 or 3 weeks, you think is good for 40, 50 a night, game after game. So I think Nuggets are really in desperate need of that high volume scoring back in the lineup, because they've got a lot of grit and a lot of like playmaking that goes through Jokic, and Jokic can score, obviously. But I think Murray is really that kind of glass cannon that comes into the squad and just gives you, like, money in terms of scoring. Hopefully not as streaky and more consistent. And obviously probably doesn't need to play that defensive element that you're talking about with Donovan. But I think he is an absolute swing player for the Nuggets, just in terms of like his impact to the team when he's not there and when he is there, and what the Nuggets need as well.
In the interest of time and not having the final say, I just want to quickly mention I also had a Denver Nuggets player, but Michael Porter Jr.
Yeah.
Just for the fact of how raw he is and how much better he can be. I feel like if he can become better than Murray, then you're talking about another serious contender in the West. But I digress. Quickly speaking of the Nuggets, we actually got a quick community talk question live from my friend Adrian. He's an avid Nuggets supporter, and it ties into the reports that Nuggets have now become the front runners to sign Ben Simmons.
Interesting.
He just said to me, and quote, "Jakey, being a Nuggets fan, what is your expert opinion on Denver being the front runners? I don't know how to feel about it." And then he expanded by saying, "There's not much info on this deal, but they're calling us a sleeper team, ready to trigger a multi-team deal. I'm feeling very iffy about it, especially if our trade pieces are most likely going to be either Murray or MPJ. Not sure if I want that. Simmons' trade stock has plummeted." So, Adrian, thanks for the live question. And it is a very interesting one. Luka, how would you pass that? I know I haven't given you time to think about it, but just a live reaction to should Ben Simmons be on the roster, and who would you trade for him, and does it even work?
Look, this is the first I'm hearing of it, and this is a complete live reaction, so I might and ah about it, and we might go back and forth, but I think it's really good to talk about. My initial reaction is, I think I like it. And I know it goes against what I was just saying in terms of what the Nuggets need from like Murray, for example, in like a glass cannon shooting, but maybe not great on the defensive end. But then I think about the fact that you just brought up MPJ, who is raw, he is young, but he could very easily kind of be that scoring cornerstone of the team. And what Ben would bring to the team. Oh, I just got a bit of audio come through my fucking headset. Sorry, everybody.
That's okay.
Charging headset. What they would get from Ben defensively and what they'd get from him playmaking wise, I think could work very, very nicely with Jokic's play style, just when I think about how their two games work. And you do have Murray coming back off injury. So if you had to give Murray up and, another team came in and somehow it came together and you could keep Michael Porter Jr., I think I like that quite a lot, actually. Defensively, they become incredibly stout immediately, especially with like Aaron Gordon there. Yeah, initial reaction is I like it as long as you can keep MPJ.
Yeah, it's a really tricky one with the live reaction, as you say. I initially disliked it and disagree with you, but I think there's a way it works only if Aaron Gordon can be convinced to take a bench role, because I do like the balance of having a starting lineup of, it's probably going to be Murray, Will Barton, Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon, and Nikola Jokic. All players can shoot, all players are two-way players. Yes, MPJ is not a good defender, but in a sense, he's a two-way player because of his size and he's working on it. But I just don't see how it fits unless you start Simmons at the 4, playing that roaming guard forward role and having Murray, Barton, and MPJ.
Well, you wouldn't have Murray anymore, in my opinion.
Oh, so you're saying he'd be traded? Okay.
Yeah, Murray would be included in the deal in my mind, because that's probably who Philly want and who would work well with their system. And he's just coming off injury, so he's probably like I don't know how Nuggets feel about him. I don't know what
Okay.
what the health looks like. So I'm picturing that he's included in the deal. So what I'm saying
Okay.
is, if he's included and you keep MPJ, I like it. If you have to
Okay.
lose MPJ for it, I don't know if I would like that.
Okay, let me rephrase then, because you're right. I wasn't even thinking of the return. I dislike any proposal unless it's Gordon plus supplementary pieces. I,
Yeah.
I would prefer Murray and MPJ over Simmons and wouldn't lose either for the potential of Simmons in a new role. It is a bit of a better fit compared to Philly, given that Jokic isn't as much of a banger down low as Embiid is, even though he does work in the post. But I think the combination of Murray, Porter Jr., and Jokic is so unique, and I wouldn't
Mm.
tamper with it. So if I was, fitting out Gordon for Simmons, I'd be pretty satisfied with that and work out the kinks. But I would not be giving up Murray or MPJ
Yeah,
personally.
fair enough. That's a good
Yeah,
shout. But I personally disagree at the moment. I think with Jamal coming off an ACL surgery,
yeah,
his like that it's just a concern, right? And again,
yeah,
I don't know the details behind how he's rehabbing, and what the news on him is. If it's and maybe Nuggets have a good view on that, and they're like, oh, he's not going to come back quite the same, and you move
yeah,
it. So I don't know, but I agree. Like if he comes back at 100%, I probably wouldn't mess with it too much and run it back. But
yeah.
if they kind of see an opportunity to get rid of maybe a player that's now never going to hit what we really expected of him, then maybe it could be good.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
We'll have to see. But it's interesting. But I'm so interested. Like, let's not talk about Ben, but I'm so keen to see what happens. Just as an
Yeah, me
aside.
too. Me too. Me too. But Luca, we're on to the segment that probably everyone wants to hear is the Sports Illustrated Top 100.
Yeah.
I'll let you take it away, but I just want to make a quick shout out to Sports Illustrated. Obviously, this isn't a sponsor, but I've really appreciated their stuff over the years. In particular, I like one of their journalists named Ben Golliver. He has his own podcast and he's always spitting facts and he's really intellectual with his takes and does his homework. And he was spearheading these top 100s for the last few years. But I believe Ben has now moved over to Washington Post. But the point of me saying this is the SI top 100 is always pretty rock solid, and I agree with most of their takes. There's always going to be a bit of variance when you do 100 players and people have different opinions. But yeah, I think this is a good little sounding board to talk about. And yeah, Luca, I guess what are some of your interesting takeaways? What have you seen on this list that you question, that you like, that you dislike? Give me your number one sort of thing to talk about on this top 100.
Awesome. Yeah, nice little shout out there. So look, there's a few things that have piqued my interest with this list. And as you say, it kind of gets a little muddy when you kind of trying to do it for 100 players. That's never easy. But there's a few kind of things that stood out to me that I wanted to talk about. And it's not really in the upper kind of section of the list. I think for the most part, that's fairly rock solid. There is some stuff there, and we can get to it a little bit later. But one thing that I wanted to start off with immediately at 100 is Jordan Clarkson, who kicks us off. And I didn't like that. And I thought it was really surprising considering they had players like Derek White, Jay Crowder, Derrick Rose in front of Clarkson, all of whom I like. But are they better than Clarkson and more impactful to their team than Clarkson? I don't think so. And I don't think at this point in their careers, any of them are better than Jordan Clarkson. So, yeah, I just didn't like that. I just thought he, would be a little higher considering some of the other players that they put there. But yeah, that was my immediate like, okay, this is weird. Started off on the wrong foot. And I thought maybe
We
I'd disagree with the whole list. But the list itself is good for the most part. There's a few little things.
we don't have to spend much time on this because I vehemently agree with you.
Yeah.
I think you got to feel for these guys that make the top 100 because there's so many things you have to take into account. Guys you mentioned like Derrick Rose, Jay Crowder, a couple of others, they're good, solid players and they've probably shown a bit more chops in the playoffs. But in a vacuum, I'm taking Clarkson any day of the week. And even with context, I'm probably taking Clarkson over all those players.
Yeah.
I mean, what's his downside? He's not a stout defender, but he can give you 20 off the bench in 10 minutes. So I'm always taking a player who is willing to come off the bench, who can light it up, get 40 and 50 on a great night. And you don't need to really worry about the defense defensive side of things when he's coming off the bench, and you can structure your roster around defenders and a star. So I agree. I'd probably say Clarkson's somewhere in the 70s to 80s.
Yeah.
So they'll probably drop the ball in that about 25 to 30 spots. So yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I will work down the list. So go from my sort of highest takes in terms of not high, I mean like lower down the list, the high numbers, and we can work to the top 10 eventually.
Yeah, perfect.
I'm really interested in your thoughts at this. Dinwiddie at 75 and Lonzo at 76. Simply, who would you prefer in a vacuum at this point?
I think I'd prefer Lonzo in a vacuum at the moment. Like we saw what Dinwiddie was capable of in the season where Kyrie was out. He averaged about 20 and 7. I liked him a lot. But after, again, knee surgery, not sure what he's going to come back as. I mean, he looks good. He's a good player. But I've grown to really like Lonzo and the work that he puts into his game. So in a vacuum, I'd be taking Lonzo.
I really like that from you because I feel like that shows how far Lonzo has come. And even in your own opinion, because I know how much you love Dinwiddie, the ACL for me is what makes this a really close conversation, because I think pre-ACL, what Dinwiddie was able to do in that first season when Kyrie and KD came to Brooklyn, and KD didn't play the whole season and Kyrie was just in la land. Dinwiddie was averaging something like 20 points and 6 assists, and something that Lonzo hasn't been able to do up to this point. Yes, defensively, Lonzo's far superior, but I really like the way Dinwiddie can carry an offensive unit.
Yeah.
So despite my love for Lonzo, I'm going to give Dinwiddie the edge. I don't know why. Maybe I like the underdog because I do love Lonzo, as you know. But I'm going to give Dinwiddie one more year to show me what he can do with Washington and Beal. Because I think sneakily he could be another 20 to 22 point scorer again, and that's pretty valuable in this league.
Yeah, and I just want to, since we're talking about Dinwiddie here, I just want to give you a little kind of piece of my mind as well on Dinwiddie. I felt someone that was behind both of them at 78 was a little disrespected, which is Terry Rozier. Scary Terry behind Dinwiddie, Bogdanovic, DeJounte Murray, and that's Bogdanovic at Utah, and Harris as well, Gary Harris. I don't just what Terry Rozier's been able to do the last few years at Charlotte. Like he has been absolutely like on a tear at times, and I actually think he's been like the most available, the most just in terms of like consistent, and he's really shown what he can do. So I actually thought, even though Dinwiddie and Lonzo were there at 76 and 75, I actually like Terry Rozier more than both of them.
And sorry, did you say, just for clarity, that Gary Harris is higher than Rozier?
Yeah.
Okay, that's flat out incorrect. I will defend the top 100 list setters. I think what they do, whether we like it or not, is they go more than 1 year to evaluate this list. So I think the only thing holding Rozier back has been the hot cold nature. I agree, Rozier at his best is an absolute microwave of a scorer, and I would have him much higher than where he is, and probably not much higher, but probably 7 to 10 spots higher and ahead of Dinwiddie and Lonzo, given he can shoot the ball. His offensive skill set is above both of the players that we've mentioned. So yeah, I'd probably like to see Rozier in the high 50s, early 60s.
Yeah.
Even the high 60s is probably appropriate.
Yeah, I agree. I just felt it was a little low, but yeah, I think we agree on that. Just I want to move on to a different player here, and we might have very different opinions on this one, but I want to talk about it because for exactly that reason. And that is Andrew Wiggins. At 88. So he's kind of the lowest behind all these players we've just discussed, barring Jordan Clarkson. And the reason why I want to talk about it is, look, he's not a groundbreaking player. I agree that he probably won't ever live up to the hype of being a number one pick. But when I see Duncan Robinson at like 85, and the fact that Andrew Wiggins shot nearly 50% from the field, nearly 40% from three, averaging about 19 points a game, being the second leading scorer on the Warriors last season, seems so wrong. Like I'm not a fan of Wiggins by any stretch of the imagination, and I completely agree that he deserves a lot of the critique that he gets. But I just don't. I can't agree with his placing when I see some of the players in front. Even some of the players we were talking about before. I think Wiggins is better than them.
Yeah, it's tough because I think people are just sick and tired of the Wiggins paradox.
Yeah.
One year he's dropping 40s and high 30s, and you're thinking this is finally the year that Wiggins is going to do it. He's finally going to show that consistency. His talent coming out of college is probably top 20 in the league, but he just never realized that. But again, I digress. What's happened has happened, and this is who Wiggins is. I think his ranking is going to be more like 188 after his vaccine
Yeah,
stance.
yeah, Jesus. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's appropriate. But yeah, look, dude, I can get behind what you're saying, but I don't have too much enthusiasm with it, so it doesn't bother me either way because of how weird he's been.
Yeah.
But I agree, as a two-way wing, he can throw it down, he can play defense, he can shoot the ball. He's probably a top 60, 65 type player, but yeah, it just doesn't get me angry enough. But I totally get where you're coming from.
Exactly.
But on the Golden State Warriors team, another guy, so I thought it'd be a good little segue. Klay Thompson at 57.
I had it there too.
Yeah, the question I want to ask you is simply, will he be the biggest mover on this list? And the reason I ask that is because it's probably obvious to say if he comes back, he's probably a top 15 player. But I guess what I'm asking is, do you think his health will allow that?
Look, I think even if he returns to 75% of his former self, I think it's disrespectful to put him behind players like DeAndre Hunter and Mikal Bridges. Like,
Yeah.
after everything he's shown us as a basketball player throughout his career, even if he comes back at 50% of who he is, he's better than DeAndre Hunter and Mikal Bridges.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I think he will be the biggest mover. Like, and that was a little like over the top. Like, I'm just trying to point out that I thought Klay Thompson at 57 was strange. I know he hasn't played for 2 years, but you got to give him the benefit of the doubt and expect that they've been rehabbing him the right way. They've kept him out for 2 years for exactly this purpose. Like, they're not rushing into it. They're going to make sure that he's as ready as possible. And I trust his jump shot. I trust his, we saw him score. How many points was it? Like, on 11 dribbles. Like, do you remember? 61 on like 11 dribbles. And he doesn't even need to be as mobile as he used to be to still put up like his numbers. He's going to be a spot shooter. He's going to come off screens and he's going to knock him down. And if he does that, even close to health wise of what he was, he's like in a different universe to players they put in front of him.
Yeah. Nothing more needs to be said there. I completely agree. I'm enjoying these little quick hitters, so I'll give you another one. Lamelo Ball, Charlotte Hornets, first time on this list, given he was a rookie at 51, which I think is quite respectable. Where would you predict him being next year? Give me a rough number.
Yeah, good question. I did have Lamelo on here on kind of my little things that I wanted to talk about, but for a different reason, because I actually thought that MPJ I thought they should have been reversed. I actually like MPJ a bit more than Lamelo, both ceiling wise and right now. Yep. But I think Lamelo will be a high mover for next year. I think he's going to have a breakout sophomore season. I hope, and I can probably see him being in that 30 to maybe around 30s, probably not in the 20s, but I can see him probably being like steadily creeping his way up, probably about 15 to 20 spots if he has a nice little run of form this season and has that little sophomore bump.
It's frightening to think because I agree with you. I put a circle around 35.
Yeah,
that's where I think he might fall. But if the guy gets up to about 19 points, 8 rebounds, 9 assists, which isn't out of the realm for him, it's going to be really hard for him not to be a top 20 player with those numbers alone and the impact he has on a team, because he's got a perimeter base game, because he's got really crafty, jelly-like finishing around the rim. But I want to use a bit of modesty and caution with Lamelo because he's still young and he's still a bit of a character. But I think I'm convincing you that he's going to be a top player in this league. But yeah, we'll see. I like the Michael Porter Jr. Comment because it's really a matter of taste. Because I like him as well, but I'm just really all aboard the Lamelo train at the moment.
Yeah, the only concern that I have with Lamelo long term is mechanically, and I know that sounds like stupid.
Point,
like we've seen mechanically wrong, I guess, players be very successful in this league. But I think being a guard and like really good defensive players and teams will be able to exploit that, I think. And obviously it was his first year in the league, so he was, it takes time for teams to work you out. They're going to need tape. They're going to need to play you. They're going to need to understand how to deal with players. And I think that's his only kind of setback in teams being able to work him out. And he wasn't the most efficient at the best of times. So if he does things just because of volume, I don't know if that's necessarily good. Yeah.
The one final comment on Lamelo, and I say this complimentary. He's got like that Gumby build, that long, sort of lanky type of frame, and if he can pack some size to that and keep his skill set and refine a couple of things, maybe his footwork when he jumps for a jump shot, his elbow pointing out, that sort of thing, I think we could really see an efficient point guard in the unicorn realm who puts up the numbers that I mentioned, which could put him in that higher upper echelon. So that's
completely
my final
agree.
Comment, but
one player that I want to talk about, just a quick tiny little tidbit. We don't need to talk about it for too long, but I kind of want to point it out because it actually made me pretty angry. I was pretty passionate about it. Kemba Walker being in the 60s. He rightfully dropped about 30 plus places from last year. He was in the 30s. But he's not the player he used to be, and I actually don't even like him in my top 100 anymore. So I know that might seem like a stretch, but I want to hear your thoughts. I actually was quite when I saw him in the 60s, I was like, oh, like if I had to put him in the top 100, he'd be 100 to 80 definitely.
That's fascinating because I thought you were angry because he was too high, to be honest. I completely disagree for the first time in pod history.
Wow.
The reason I say that is because when he signed with Boston, he signed a 4-year, $160 million deal. And you're going to get no arguments from me that his production on that pay packet has been atrocious. But the fact remains, when he came back last year from that niggling knee injury, he was averaging 18 and 9. In the bubble before he went down with that chronic knee injury, last season or the season before, beg your pardon, Miami were boxing one in him because he was that lethal from the perimeter. Obviously, we don't need to speak about his Charlotte resume, and that's a couple of years ago, so I know it's probably not as relevant. But the point I'm trying to make is Kemba Walker on $8 million, with his injuries, with his inconsistency, is an absolute bargain if he can come back to his former self or close to. I actually omitted him from my swing players, but he was on the list. He was on the list of people that I could have mentioned. So I think 60s is fair, maybe slightly higher, but it's hard to pass with a player like that in terms of where exactly you rank him because he used to be a former All-Star. So I have faith that Kemba can get back to his true self with a full off season, which he's had. And if he gets back to a sub 20-point player, we might look back and say he's actually been valued a bit too low in this ranking. But I get what you mean because he's been so up and down for the last couple of seasons.
And I completely agree with your assessment in terms of he is an absolute bargain at the price that he's at. But I consider that irrelevant to this list. Like I think that's a really good point, and I completely agree with you. But like the fact of the matter is, we do know he has some chronic injuries that could potentially be, make or break for him. And we've seen such like up and down production from him over the last couple of seasons. So I don't know, like it. I think you get what I'm trying to say, but I do also agree that he does fit into your kind of mold of he is a swing player. If he comes back to what he once was, or even 70 to 80% of what he once was, like, and on the pay packet, like amazing. But just like terms of raw talent, what we've seen from him, yeah, I think he could be much higher than 60. But yeah, just with what we've seen the last few years, I don't know. I just am kind of off Kemba Walker.
I think we need to learn to disagree better because we're too nice.
Yeah, exactly.
But
Fuck you, man.
moving, yeah, exactly. Fuck you. I've got another spicy take because it's probably not a snub, but I call it a snub because you know how much I value playoff performers. I think Draymond Green at 35 is one of the biggest snubs on the list, and you might say to me, why? That sounds pretty reasonable. Being a top 35 player is no mean feat. I keep going back to what I saw him do in those play-in games.
Yeah.
I saw a guy in cruise control all season, mentoring the young players, doing what he needs to do, preparing his body for an end-of-season run, which unfortunately wasn't as long as they wanted to last season, the Golden State Warriors. But Draymond Green's ability to be a top 5 perimeter defender, a top 5 rim protector, a top 5 reader of the game offensively and defensively, the chemistry he has with Steph Curry, as you mentioned. His shot has fallen off in the past couple of years, but he can still get his 6 to 8 points, 10 to 15 rebounds, 10 to 12 assists. He is the ultimate winner in the NBA. I know we've had chats about him in the past because you didn't like how people valued him as a top 10 player, and I get where the warts start to show when you got him that high. But for me, he's probably top 20, just in terms of importance to a playoff team. And when he's switched on, he creeps even higher to that top 15, 18 range. So 35 is a bit of an annoyance on my behalf.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I can definitely see, where you're coming from with that, and I completely agree. Like, I guess if you're looking at like skill sets and like everybody likes to look at like the flashiness of some of the players in front, and so I completely agree. The fact that he was behind Ben Simmons, definitely rubs me the wrong way. I totally agree, and I similarly had the same thing with Westbrook, who surprisingly I don't mind in the 30s considering some of the names above. He is one of those players that's really hard to put somewhere, but when I saw him behind Ben Simmons, for example, it's just after the season that Westbrook had, we got to give the guy a bit of love.
Yeah, it just shows the difficulty of making these lists because Ben Simmons is younger, healthier, and in the right environment. I could see having a better impact in the playoffs, but we can't give him those crowns yet because he hasn't done it. And similarly, we know Westbrook has been poor at times, but he had a great season, as you say. So if you're doing a year-on-year ranking, I think these become more cleaner, but I do sympathize with SI, as I say, because they're doing it with context. So
yeah, and that's why I said, and that's why I agree too. Like, I actually surprisingly don't mind him in the 30s, considering like if you take it to the average fan, they go Westbrook, like not top 10. Like, well, you got to think about these things a little bit.
I also found really interesting in the teens, the probably the best shooting guard / small forward combos in the league. I liked how they did 12, 13, 14, 15 in this particular order. PG 13, Tatum, Butler, and Beal. And my question to you would be, if you could re-rank that in those slots, who would be your best to worst?
Wow. If I had to rework that,
so again,
it'd be PG, Tatum,
Butler,
and then Butler and Beal. I think I like Beal at the tail end of that. I agree with that, even though we know that Beal has unreal production offensively. I think the fact that he's the only player on that list that isn't a true two-way player, immediately kind of I place value upon the other three as being winning players for franchises. I probably right now would change things around a little bit to have Tatum at the front of that list, purely because he's young. We know what he's capable of, and skill set wise, I don't think he's very far off, if off at all, from PG-13 and Butler. So I'd actually have Tatum at the front of that, and then I probably can't give you a really good answer on Butler and PG-13, but I'd probably have PG above. So I'd probably go Tatum, PG, Butler, Beal.
Okay, interesting. And I must commend you on your sensibility of keeping Beal at the end because until you said that, I probably would have had him a bit higher. But when you think about it, he's an awesome scoring guard. But the size and skill of Butler, Tatum, and PG-13 is just so overwhelming. So back to front, I'll go Beal as well. Uh, I have, sorry, Beal at the back, Tatum at the front, exact same as you have. But I'm going to swap PG-13 and Butler purely on the fact that I saw what Jimmy did in the bubble finals. Again, we can talk about context, talk about it being easier or whatever.
Yeah.
But having a 45-point triple-double against LeBron James in a closeout game to keep your season alive
Oh,
really
yeah,
keeps you
unbelievable.
up
Yeah.
there. So
I did.
PG-13,
I would just say I did really like what we saw from PG-13 last playoffs
yeah.
without Kawhi. So that's why maybe a bit of recency bias on my behalf and forgetting about what Butler did in the bubble. But I did really like PG's delivery in the playoffs last season.
Absolutely, and it's worth mentioning, and I was going to get around to that. I think the one thing that annoys me about PG, and it's just my taste, he's got a bit of that Wiggins about him, but
Yeah.
on the elite superstar level. I want to see you do it consistently. I know Butler sort of takes time off in the regular season, but I can count on him in the playoffs to give me 20 to 25 and do what he does. So it's close, but I'll go Tatum, Butler, PG, Beal.
Yeah. And talking in the teens, I want to bring up a player here because a very, very hard player to kind of fit somewhere. And you might know who I've got on my mind, and it's Kyrie Irving, who I think they nestled in at 19.
Yep.
And he was behind the likes of CP3, who I believe was at 18. And then Trey and D Book ahead of them as well at 17 and 16 respectively. So a little order there. So how about we play this game again and I ask you to reorder that. So that was D Book at 16, Trey at 17, CP3 at 18, and Kyrie at 19.
Man, asking me that live is so difficult, but I'm going to try my best. It's really hard because I actually had a question that ties into your question. How high would Kyrie be if his mental health wasn't a factor? Um, I am going to pass it like this. I think Devin Booker has earned the respect of being number one for now purely on the fact that I can't count on Kyrie night to night, given he made the finals, was dropping 30s and 40s like it was nothing, and is the youngest or the second youngest on this list, a bit older than Trey, a bit more physically opposing, a much better defender, even though Devin Booker doesn't hang his hat on the defensive end of the floor. I'll give him the number one spot for now. I'm going to give Kyrie number two and by a whisker behind Devin Booker, only because we keep going back to the mental health. There's rumors that if he gets traded, he would retire. I saw that report. I don't know who said that, but that sounds on brand for Kyrie.
Yeah.
So the skill set is probably top 10 for me, top 12. So if he had his head switched on, he'd be better than Damian Lillard, in my opinion, better than. I won't make any more big calls.
Yeah.
That sort of range, you
Yeah.
know. So I'll go Beal, Kyrie. Who were the last two?
D
Trey
Book,
Young
so
and
Trey Young and Chris Paul.
yeah, I'll give Trey Young the nod annoyingly only because Chris Paul's reaching the end, similar to LeBron.
Yeah.
I would even go as far as to say I'll probably take Trey in the playoffs as well because he was absolutely killing people. So yeah, Devin Booker, Kyrie Irving, Trey Young, and Chris Paul, but it's very, very close. It's
Yeah.
not like a far 1 to 4 type of thing.
Yeah, no, definitely respect the kind of love that you gave D Book there. I personally just like I can't ignore Kyrie's skill set, and the man
Yeah,
is
very
incredible.
fair.
And so I actually had him at the front of all those three. But in saying that, I do completely agree that he's unreliable. He is, a bit of a basket case at times, and it just makes it hard to kind of really assess his value in the way that you should be able to assess his value because, yeah, as we say, like skills wise and yeah, I don't want to make any crazy calls, but definitely around that top 10 range. And I'm going to go out there and say it if he didn't get injured and Harden didn't play, and they didn't force him to play on that hammy, I think personally that Brooklyn beat the Bucks if Kyrie's healthy. So
Not even a hot take. It
yeah,
was Kevin Durant's shoe size that disqualified them from moving on. So
yeah.
yeah, I agree 100%. So last one for me, Luca, and you can have a take after this if you have anything left over. I want to ask you a question. Is Kawhi Leonard better than Anthony Davis?
Really, really good question. And
Sorry, before you answer, give me short yes or no's because I'm gonna work to something.
okay, you're gonna work to something. All right, I'm gonna say, oh fuck. With that knee, oh yes.
Okay, so he's better than Anthony Davis. Is Kawhi Leonard better than Joel Embiid? Just health permitting. Health permitting.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Is Kawhi Leonard better than James Harden?
Yeah.
Is Kawhi Leonard better than Luka Doncic?
I think so.
Okay, is he better than Nikola Jokic?
I think so again.
Is he better than Steph Curry?
I probably would stop there.
Okay, and he's not better than LeBron, and he's not better than KD, and I think we'd both, with gritted teeth, say he's not better than Giannis. Would you agree with that, or would you still take Kawhi over Giannis?
I'd probably take Giannis, but
Okay.
it's yeah,
The,
for a different
the,
reason.
the point I'm making is that ACL or no ACL, I have a bit of an issue with Kawhi being at number 10. His previous rank was 3. I find that a bit disastrous considering that the way they've ranked other players in this top 100 list is off multiple seasons, not just what happened to your ACL in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Because I have no reason to believe until I see it that Kawhi will be in any way a significantly diminished player when he returns. I saw Kevin Durant snap his Achilles tendon and come back even better. So, yeah, I just think Kawhi at 10, it looks so weird, don't you think? Like, it's such a low ranking for an elite player. I know he's weird. I know he's not a leader. I know he's done some strange things in his career, but he's such a good two-way player. He's got one of the most automatic mid-range jumpers. He's so relentless in his approach to the game, and he's probably the best on-ball defender in the league. So I found that very interesting.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, he is the best two-way player in the league. Like, we've seen what he's done in, finals matchups. Like, there's that classic video of LeBron at the free throw line seeing Kawhi coming and mouthing fuck. Like, he didn't want to see the guy on the court because he didn't want to be defended by him. So, the kind of impact that he has on the defensive end. And then offensively, he's good for 25 to 30 a night, and he's going to do it hyper efficiently as well. So, like, knowing what Kawhi is capable of on both ends of the floor, he's a top 5 player to me. Like I said, stops behind Curry, but you know what? Like, you could even tell me that, you rate Kawhi more than Curry just because of what he brings to you on both ends of the floor. So, I completely agree. It just looks weird to have him that low.
I'm happy to give Curry that nod, but yeah, like you said, it's such a close call. And to finish, I think the top 5 is pretty much fine. Like, it's such a subjective list, but KD, then Giannis, then LeBron, Curry, and Jokic, it's pretty unarguable. Like, it's an awesome list. You could probably throw Kawhi in there, like we just mentioned, but I don't have any more issues or any other observations. What are you thinking, Luca? Anything left on your list?
My only one is, and I'm just going to get your thoughts on it, and maybe I'm not going to go too ham at it, but Mike Conley at 43.
Do you want to kick off, or do you want me to say my reaction?
Nah, I want to get your reaction, live reaction.
It's so weird. Like, with a lot of this stuff, we've been doing this for so long in terms of just our fandom and analysis of the game. I feel like we're good at putting numbers on players arbitrarily about where we think they rank. And my first reaction was Mike Conley 73. I don't know why I said 73, but it's just that sort of range fits to me. And now that I think about it, to prove my point, Dinwiddie's at 75, Lonzo's at 76, Rosie's at 78. So that actually works out perfectly. And I promise I didn't prepare that because you asked me that question live. So my knee-jerk reaction is it's a little bit high. I really do like what Conley. I really do like what Conley can do on the court. Last year he was fantastic before he had that hamstring issue, but it sounds a little bit high without looking at the list right now because I'm trying to do it blind to be objective. What do you think of my take on that?
Yeah, look, I agree. I think being a top 50 player is very like, I mean, you're within the 50 best players in the NBA, and if I think about the 50 best players in the NBA, if I had to come up with a list, I don't think I'd be putting Mike Conley there.
Yeah.
Like at 43, nearly breaking into the top 30, like 40 players. I don't know. It just like, I mean, the guy is like, how old is he now? Mid 30s, like nearly
I,
35.
he's actually younger than you think. I think he's like 31, 32, but he's just been around for so long.
Is he that
I'll
young?
get it up now, but let me have a look. I'll have a look right now live with the fast
He's
internet,
30. He's
hopefully.
33.
33, yeah. So, yeah.
And 1987. So in 2022, he'll be turning 34
Okay, yeah. That's pretty aged.
this year, and then he'll be turning 35 next year. So I don't know. Like, yeah, just seems a little high to have a 34-year-old man in a month at number 43 if your name's not, LeBron James or Chris Paul. So
And the guys behind him, I'd probably take Tobias Harris, Jamal Murray, Clint Capella, Malcolm Brogdon, Fred VanVleet,
exactly.
and Gordon Hayward and Siakam above him. So it just shows your point. It's probably a little bit high, to be honest.
Yeah,
Or
exactly.
very high.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. A little high or very high, take your pick. But yeah, I completely agree with you. That's just one that stood out to me when I was looking through it. I was going through the list, like, yeah, I don't really agree with that. Don't really. And then I saw Mike Conley at 43, and I was like, no chance. Like, but
Well, yeah. Sorry, do you have anything else to say?
no, that's it. That's it.
I was just going to say, guys and girls, our sincerest apologies with the video quality. We was very excited to get this going, and as you can tell, it's been a fantastic episode, if I do say so myself. I feel like the content was awesome. We got through a lot of good stuff, and hopefully the podcast version of this comes out really clean, obviously, because it's not a watch, it's more of a listen. As always, please check out our Instagram at the Fourth Quarter Pod. And we've got a link in our bio with all our other social platforms, YouTube, our Apple Podcasts, which we would really appreciate a subscription. If you guys can leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, it really, really helps us out. We will absolutely strive to get this fixed, the video stuff, by next week. I'm hoping it's just Discord doing a bit of a malfunction tonight for some reason, and it's just going to go back to normal. But yeah, Luca, I'll leave it to you to finish off, but just wanted to get my 2 cents in there.
No, thanks for the plug as always. And yeah, we'll be sure to make sure that the video is smooth and up and running and operational from next week. And we'll also see if we can meme Jake a little bit on socials with all the different little screen bites that we can get from him. But yeah, as always, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching after the live ends. We really appreciate everybody on YouTube and Apple Podcasts listening. And we'll be keen to chat with you again next